Go ahead.
Okay, hi everyone. Today, Ned and I are going to be talking about analyzing your audience. We are going to touch on specific points relating to analyzing your audience, which are keeping the audience in mind, identifying with your audience, leaving your ego behind, knowing your demographic, stereotyping, and situational analysis. Let's talk about audience-centeredness and what exactly we mean by that. Can anyone tell me what audience-centeredness means? Give me a definition of it. Okay. Correct. So for a formal definition, we can see that audience-centeredness is basically keeping your audience in the forefront of your speech. So you're keeping your audience in mind while you're making your speech, or you're writing your speech or preparing it. Another thing you want to do when you're thinking about audience-centeredness is, who am I speaking to? Who is your audience? What do I want them to know or believe? And what is the most effective way of me actually accomplishing that goal and getting my message across to the audience? Another thing you want to look at is identifying with your audience. Now, when we say identifying with the audience, can anyone tell me what we mean by actually identifying with your audience and give me an example of how you can identify with your audience? Correct. Another thing that you'd want to do is you can go ahead and tell a story. You can actually tell something that's personal to you that has happened, an experience that you've had that will actually help you to connect with that audience and identify with them while you're presenting your information to them. Egocentrism. Egocentrism is basically, the formal definition of that is looking at your audience and analyzing them and saying that they're all alike, okay? So what you don't want to do is you don't want to look at your audience and say that they're all alike. You want to treat everyone as an individual, and you want to write your speech in that same context. You want to not analyze your audience and say, oh, they won't be able to understand this, or this is going to go over their heads, or, you know, I'm not going to touch on this subject because it's just not going to reach my audience. So a formal definition, as you can see, a tendency to be concerned with your own values, beliefs, or well-being. You don't want to do that. Let's talk about demographic analysis. Demographic analysis is actually looking at the age of the people that you're going to be presenting to. So for example, you don't want to present something about Lady Gaga to an audience that is 70 and up, or present something about Frank Sinatra to an audience that's 15 years of age. So you really want to pay attention to the age of your audience and the information that you're going to be providing to them. The next thing that we're talking about is gender, as far as demographics are concerned. You do not want to specifically make any statements or that would be specific to a certain gender while you're making your speech. So for example, if you are presenting to an audience that's all women, you don't want to make a joke about how women are in the workforce and, you know, they're not at home cooking, okay? So you want to make sure that you don't make any gender-related points in your speech. Religion is another very, very touchy subject. It speaks for itself. You don't want to talk about anything that's going to be specific to a specific religion. Same thing goes for if you are actually presenting to someone that's in a Catholic religion. You don't want to talk about that specific religion to where you might offend somebody in the audience. So you want to make sure you pay attention to that group as far as religion is concerned. Sexual orientation. Again, is your speech centered towards gay rights activists? You know, you want to make sure that you're paying attention to that, and you're looking for who you're presenting to as far as that is concerned. Racial or ethnic cultural background. You don't want to say something specific to someone's race or ethnic background that's going to offend them. So again, you want to analyze your audience and know, who am I presenting to, and is there any racial or ethnic cultural specifics that I need to be aware of when I'm making this speech? Finally, your group or membership. For example, if you're out there and you're presenting to some Girl Scouts and you're talking about how to make a new cookie, you want to make sure that you're not talking about something else that cannot pertain to that particular group. So make sure that you're sticking to that topic. Okay, stereotyping. We talked about stereotyping when we talked about listening and being an audience member and actually listening to what the speaker was talking about, and stereotyping the speaker by specifically saying something maybe like, oh, I don't like the way that person's dressed, I'm not gonna listen to what they're saying. Or, that person speaks and they have an accent. Stereotyping can be the same thing as far as your audience. You as the speaker, speaking to your audience, you wanna make sure that you're not stereotyping your audience and saying, for example, my audience, they're just young and this is gonna be way over their heads, something to that effect. Okay, so some points we could touch on there would be our a simplified image of the group, or we can also assume that all the members are alike. So everybody in here thinks the same, they act the same, they do everything the same. We don't want to do that. The last thing we're going to touch on is situational analysis. And basically when we're talking about situational analysis, you're looking at the situation or environment that you're going to be in. Okay, so you're going to be analyzing, for example, your venue. Okay, you want to take that into consideration. You want to look at the size of the group that you'll be presenting to. Are you presenting to a group of 50 or are you presenting to a group of 100? You need to make sure that your speech is geared towards the size of the group. The physical settings, we want to look at, is it hot in the room? Is it cold in the room? Is the room small and cramped? So are you presenting to a group of 50 inside of a room that can hold 25 people, okay? So definitely the physical setting of the room is going to be very important. The disposition towards the topic. So basically, how is your audience going to feel about what you're presenting to them? Or what do they know about what you're presenting to them? Okay, so you want to make sure you keep that in mind as well. Another thing that we probably don't think about is how the audience feels about you, okay, which is very important, okay? Are you credible? Do you know what you're talking about? Are you providing them information because you've had 13 years of experience in this field? Why should they listen to you? And last would be a disposition towards the occasion. Did they pay to come see this speech? Were they forced? I shouldn't say forced, but were they actually, gathered into a group such as a meeting from work or something and said, hey, you've got to attend this specific presentation. So you want to take into account how is the audience being presented with coming to this presentation that you will be given. Now, one of the things that can happen as well, and I'll leave you with this, is sometimes you don't have the time to actually sit down and collect this information prior to actually giving your speech. So one of the questions that I had when I was actually going over this was, how can you present this if you don't have the time in advance to present it to someone? How can you get this information if you don't have the time in advance? So what you would want to do is you can do an audience poll prior to your speech. You can also do a meet and greet at the door with your guests so that you can get an idea of who they are and how they feel. And that can kind of help you with some of these analyzing your audience that we went over with today. Does anybody have any questions? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and let Nan finish up the slides for you.
Well, if you want to know about your audience more, there's actually 4 ways that we're going to talk about in the slide. First, let's talk about attitude. Attitude. You got to know your audience attitude. Because attitude of your audience, some people may like it about your topic, some people may not. So from there, it comes to your body language, that if they're actually enjoying your topic. So with attitude, there can be a belief and value. Everybody has different belief based on their religions and their value. So here's a frame of mind. So you can. Okay, next, let's talk about how to know your audience more. And there are actually 3 ways we're going to talk about today. And those are questions. So these are the 3 questions you can ask: fixed, alternative, scale, and open-end. These are a very effective way if you know how to use them correctly. So what's fixed alternative? Well, it's basically asking a question, yes or no, not sure. They just answer simply to yes or no, and then you can get a feedback on how your audience feel about the question that you ask. Next is the scale. So with scale, you ask a question based on 1 to 10, and then from there you can actually see how they respond to your topic. So this is the way of knowing even better than fixed alternative, because with this one you can actually go from 0 to 10 how your audience will respond to your topic. And last but not least is an open-end question, because everybody have different mind and different point of view. You want to make sure you ask an open-end question so they can give you a feedback on your topic instead of close-ended. And adapting before you presenting to the audience, you want to make sure everything is access to the audience respond, and then make sure your speech and the way you're going to convince them is clear as possible. And adapting during your presentation, there might be unexpected occurs, such as your microphone is not working. So how will you fix that? Well, you gotta make sure you are prepared for unexpected circumstances, and then make sure if your audience not enjoying, make sure you make eye contact, tell a story, make a joke about it, or ask them a question to be more participate in your presentation. And last thing, I want to end with this: control what you can before you give a speech, and adjust what you can during the speech.